Fundamentally, this thinking comes from two separate ideas about how people are. There are those who think of aristocratic ideas about having a small elite who can control society, who can define the direction of the world. And they think we should be grateful that they've created grammar schools so that some other people can join in the game. The reality is we come from the other tradition. The tradition of those who believe that absolutely every individual, no matter who they are, has dignity and significance and matters. And therefore, even if you're not academically doing as well as you can at the age of 11 or 16 or 32 or 55, it does not matter, because the point is about creating a system in which your talent and your passions and the things you care about can find avenues through which they can be developed. And that's why the fight against grammar schools is just the first part of a fight for a comprehensive education system from the cradle to the grave. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that update.
And we've been in very close contact over the recent period with the NUT, for instance, who've told us in great detail about the disaster of Tory education policies even before this even greater disaster about grammar schools. But I thought I'd mention that because it's important to get this into context. What we've seen is massive spending cuts in real terms on our education system. We've seen also the intensification of debilitating testing, which all the educational experts are saying is doing nothing more than dumb down our kids rather than improve standards of education. And we've also seen an attempt, so far thwarted, but watch this next space, to make all schools into academies. In effect, the privatisation of our education system. And let's just remember what happened when academies were first introduced. They were a much more expensive system for a start off. For every academy, anybody could come along and say, I want to run one, providing I'm prepared to put in £2 million into that school. In return, the state would put in £25 million to back it. Much more expensive system than our proper state education. And of course, the academies are taken out of the control of our local education authority. And they're also an attempt to break down the collective bargaining agreements with the teachers' unions and with the other unions that represent educational staff. So they're all part of an ideological drive to dumb down standards, to divide and rule, and to destroy good standards and qualified teaching. So it's no surprise to me, in a way, having got away with that the Tories are now coming up with this nugget of grammar schools. Now, let's talk about what this is really about as far as Theresa May is concerned. She has no other idea about education than to take us back to some ideological dream day of the past in the 1950s. This isn't about taking our education forward. This is about segregating working class people from middle class people, gifted children from ordinary children. It's about divide and rule. And it's also a much more expensive system for the taxpayer. And it also undermines the whole principle of accountable local education authorities, ensuring that our resources, our collective resources, are spread evenly across our entire education system, and indeed more than that, delivering extra resources where they're needed, particularly to those poor working class areas where actually they need more resources, not less. I'm absolutely delighted that this Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn has made this one of our #1 priorities, is to attack Theresa May in Parliament, in the streets, in the media, starting with this day of action today. There's events like this all over the country, organised by the Labour Party, backed by the trade union movement, to say absolutely clear, Theresa May, you will not get away with dividing us over grammar schools. You will not get away with destroying our education system with grammar schools. You will not get away with your failed policies on education, which is no way to treat young children and give them the future they need. We say education, 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 not segregation, segregation, segregation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Martin. Next we've got a Unison organiser, Jack Hemingway, who's going to talk to us about support staff. Obviously education has a huge amount of people involved, and our support staff are really key to providing a good education for plenty of our children. So here he is.
Thanks very much. Yes, I'm here from Unison today. We're one of the main unions that represent school support staff. We're here supporting this important campaign because this terrible proposal by the Conservative government would have a devastating impact on our members as well as on the children that will suffer from its consequences. As a union, we represent all kinds of support staff, from teaching assistants to cleaners, the vital people that keep schools running and that support teachers to deliver in the classroom. The proposed grammar schools from the Conservative government would have a terrible impact on our members, creating a two-tier education system and no doubt representing an attack on trade union bargaining rights and positions with employers. Let's be clear, no child is a failure at 11. To write off an entire generation is a disastrous policy. No children should be left behind simply because they aren't academic at that age. Unison supports this campaign on behalf of our members, and we support Jeremy Corbyn 100%. Hopefully this is a start of a campaign and a movement where we can kick the Tories out of number 10 and get a government in that will support trade union rights, support comprehensive education and deliver for our members and for students across the country. I didn't prepare a great speech today because I've only just found out I was speaking, but I hope we can all agree that this is an important campaign and we need to do our most to support Jeremy, support trade unions and get a Labour government in number 10. Thank you.
They're the people putting the poor on the streets begging and taking children into the courts every Thursday. The bloody cronies in here have got a contract. They won't show you what's in the contract. Capital are down there, they've got bloody...
Right. Our next speaker's here, Paul Blomfield's here, so...
Capital out.
Thanks very much, Olivia. I'm delighted to be here. I've just come from a campaigning on this issue on the doorstep in Highfield. We've got a team of about a dozen people out, knocking on doors, collecting signatures, seeing what people's views are. And I can tell you there's little support for grammar schools and anybody that I've talked to. I was one of the last generations of kids in Sheffield to sit the 11 plus. And I can remember the pressure that involved, and I can remember 75% of the kids that I went to school with who were discarded at the age of 11. And I'm determined that we should see no return to the 11 plus. And one of the things that's very different from when I sat the 11 plus is we've seen that growth of people, the parents, aspirational parents facing pressure to see their kids succeed, buying private tutoring. It was unthought of in the 1960s, but we could be certain now that if the 11 plus was reintroduced, we would see those who could afford it buying the tutoring to ensure that their kids succeeded. And it fits entirely into what this government's all about. Those with privilege being able to buy more privilege and ensure they pass on that privilege to their children. And so we've got to be very clear that we will campaign consistently to stop this happening, and I think that we can. I think that we can win sufficient support to defeat the government on this, but we don't stop there. If this government is really interested in social mobility and education in contributing to social mobility, then let's look at the education system from top to bottom. Let's look again. Let's look again at the achievements that we made in government as a Labour Party, a sure start at rebuilding that support for children in their earliest years, support for parents helping their children in the earliest years. It's a disgrace that all of those Sure Start centres have been brushed away by this government. Let's look again at the investment in our primary schools and ensuring that the ratios in our primary schools are what they should be and what we were putting in place. Let's look again at the conditions in which our children are learning. That Building Schools for the Future programme that transformed most of our secondary schools in Sheffield under Labour, which was beginning to roll out across our primary schools, needs to be restarted again. We need to invest in our schools and in our teachers. We need to stop attacking our teachers. We need to build. We need to recognise what an extraordinary job our teachers do and support them in that. And we need to look again at the systems of assessment within our secondary schools. I spent, as part of this big community consultation I'm doing at the moment, the big conversation, I spent an evening with a bunch of school kids just last week. And they were talking to me about the pressures that they were being put under as a result of SATs. SATs, which were introduced to try to be a measure of school performance, have been turned on their heads, are putting pressure on students in our schools, are putting pressure on teachers, and are not assisting that development of educational excellence that we wanted to see. Let's look again at the support that we give to our children post-16. Education maintenance allowances, which were so critical in ensuring that those from disadvantaged families who were under pressure to get out to work were able to support themselves going into sixth form, going into college, setting a platform to go on to university or an apprenticeship. Let's reintroduce those education maintenance allowances. And let's look again at the way we fund our higher education. In the last Parliament, we fought hard against the trebling of tuition fees. But it goes beyond trebling tuition fees. We need to look at a system which is broken, not only loading students, loading graduates with debt, but also is actually beginning to cost more than the old system cost. So it's loading graduates with debt, and it's still a huge burden on taxpayers. So we need to rethink the funding of higher education, abolishing tuition fees, and looking at alternatives, ways of making graduates, society and business contribute to funding university so that everybody has the opportunity to go, but not simply limiting to universities. We need to build on the work that we did in higher education in offering other opportunities for vocational skills and for higher skills across the board. And that's not an either or. Sometimes we talked about it as an either or. Universities for one bunch of kids, apprenticeships for another. We need to develop a matrix of opportunities post-16 so that you could start in an apprenticeship and end up in a university, or go to a university and come out with an apprenticeship, to see education in a completely different light and to commit to lifelong learning. So let's use this campaign not simply to oppose and defeat Theresa May on grammar schools. Let's use this campaign to rethink our education system for the benefit of everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul, for that. Right, that's the end of the speakers, but we will be here most of the afternoon in the green tent. So if anyone wants to come and help out, collect some leaflets, spread the word. Basically, we want everyone to know about the Tories' plans for grammar schools. So do get involved.